Weather, a day-to-day phenomenon, and being an island that lives 6 months out of the year in the hurricane season, the Department of Communication is proud to present its annual Met Department Special, highlighting the men and women of our local Met Department and its services. In our first segment, the Department of Communication features forecaster Ms. Cheryl LeBlanc, who provided some insight on the topic of climatology. What is it? What has the Met Department St. Martin been doing in this area? And what is the regional perspective on climatology?
Before you speak climatology, you need to talk weather. Weather is the day-to-day presence of the atmosphere. Climatology is an average of weather. So weather exists every day. You have a different type of weather. But climatology is an average, let's say about 30 years of what the weather is. So climatology is the study of climate and weather. It is very important because it gives us an idea as to what our surroundings are and a projection as to what we can expect in the future.
If you think and feel that the weather is a lot hotter than usual this season, you would be correct. Dcomm asked Ms. LeBlanc if we are experiencing a heat wave here at home and throughout the region.
Climate-wise, in the Caribbean, we are in a drought. From 2015 into 2016, we have been experiencing less rainfall than normal. Previously, the Caribbean experienced a drought during 2009, 2010. But last year, 2015, was the driest for most of the Caribbean countries, including St. Martin. Normally, in a year, we receive about 46 inches of rainfall. Last year, we had just about 20. So we are in a drought period, and this was contributed by what we call the El Nino, which is the warming of the Eastern Pacific Ocean. Last year into early this year, the sea surface temperatures moved up to about 3 degrees above normal in the Eastern Pacific, and this contributes to a drier Eastern Caribbean Atlantic. So whenever we have an El Nino, we have dry conditions over here. So this is part of what makes it a little hotter. Projections are we will feel this kind of heated atmosphere up until September. We'll have rainfall, but when we do get dry periods, it will be a bit hotter than normal.
Ms. LeBlanc highlighted what the Met Department is currently doing in the area of climatology, and she mentioned the various stakeholders that are working with them in building a digital database that will help in further research.
Based on what we have been doing, we have been collecting our data, trying to digitalize the data that we presently have. At the Met Office, we have rainfall data dating back to 1953. Temperature and winds we have from 1961, thereabout. So we have about 50 years plus of data. So we have been making sure that our database is in a good state for research and so on. And so we are also working in partnership with some stakeholders like the Health Department, the Nature Foundation, to see how we can collaborate, use the data that we have to find indices or indicators as to how our environment reacts to what is going on. So this is the type of, we have only started with 2 stakeholders. We are hoping to work with energy sector and agriculture if there is, to see how our climate relates or correlates with what is going on.
Ms. LeBlanc also indicated that there is a working relationship with various organizations throughout the region as it relates to climatology, and how this relationship lends to further research on how our regional climate affects our health.
In the region, we work closely with the CIMH, the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, based in Barbados. We partner with also Caribbean Met Services. We share the data. We analyze, assess the situation within the Caribbean. We take global models and downscale it to the Caribbean level to see the differences, what has been going on, and to model and see what projections we can come up with the future. Recently, there was a meeting in Dominica, held in Dominica, where about 30 meteorologists and climatologists around the Caribbean came together, and we came up with forecasts for the next 6 months for the Caribbean, basically with temperature and rainfall, to see whether we are expecting more rainfall, less rainfall, higher temperatures, because that is what we see happening lately, and it affects health. So it had a bias with health in Dominica, where we collaborated with health sectors around the Caribbean. Somebody from St. Martin was also represented from the health sector. And we used data from the Met Services and data from the health services to see whether climate is really attributing to various illnesses we see around the Caribbean.
Still ahead, why did this young forecaster choose meteorology as a career? And what are the predictions for the hurricane season 2016? All ahead as Dcomm's annual Met Department special continues. When you look around the office of the Met Department, St. Martin, you can't help but notice young faces who have chosen meteorology as a career. Dcomm spoke to local forecaster Miss Desiree Connor, who shared why she chose Met as a career choice and took us through the educational process that helped nourish her desire to learn meteorology.
Met for myself was a personal choice from a child, and it was actually my passion to study the weather. Not really to study, because I didn't know about studying weather at that time, but I wanted to figure out where these clouds were coming from, where they were going, what caused the rain, and those types of questions I was asking myself. And then Hurricane Lewis came along, and I was like, okay, that's it. I have to know more about this thing. Where did this storm come from? How did it develop? Why did it stay over us so long? And so I started to look into meteorology and the study of meteorology. The educational experience from in high school, I took the science package. So that was physics, biology, chemistry. But the emphasis for meteorology is really physics. And then I had to do general maths because I did the CXC stream. And so physics and maths was the high school path. And then for the tertiary level, which would be college, I went to Florida State and I studied my bachelor's degree in meteorology. And that was focusing more on the meteorology of the meat of the meteorology. So we did tropical meteorology, satellite meteorology, radar meteorology, and those types of things. Plus we focused on physics and we did a whole lot of maths. So we did so many maths, we went up to the engineering level of maths, which is also called ordinary differential equations. And we got even hands-on experience. So we were in the studio practicing how to do meteorology. And then once that was completed, I went on to Barbados as well. And I did more theory into meteorology. And there we also did a simulated forecast experience. So we simulated how it would be once we are on the job. And that was a good experience as well.
In the field of meteorology today, it can still be said that it's a male-dominant science. But according to forecaster Desiree Connor, we're starting to see more females coming into the field.
There's not many women in meteorology, but we are getting better over the years. I've asked that question as well, and we've had more and more women studying meteorology in the last 5 years or so, at least. And when I started here at the Met office as well, there wasn't any women. I was probably the first female here at the Met office. And currently now we have 4 women, so even locally we are getting more women into the meteorology field.
There's an initiative by government to reach elementary and high schools to encourage students into a new field of study. The science of meteorology is no exception. Ms. Connor had some practical advice to those who might be interested in learning more about meteorology, and she highlighted what the Met Department St. Martin has done to encourage young persons to study this amazing science.
I would encourage them to, first of all, start looking at the Weather Channel. Although they don't see us on the news channel here in St. Martin, if they get exposed to what meteorology is and what the weather is about by watching the Weather Channel, they will be more interested in asking questions and finding out more about what meteorology is. So once they start looking at the Weather Channel, then they can most likely come down and visit us here at the Met Office and see how we are approaching forecasting and observing the weather. And also, we can go to the schools and we can get them more in tuned into what meteorology is all about as well.
This year will mark a distinct upswing in activity from the past 3 seasons as an active tropical season is expected. For more on this topic and an explanation on the various stages of cyclone and how one develops, Dcomm spoke to forecaster Mr. Joel Pierre.
Cyclones usually start off as a disturbance over the Ethiopian highlands in Africa, and they travel to the west towards the coast of Africa. Once they get to the coast, some of the ingredients that they need to develop to become what we call a hurricane, first there must be warm surface temperatures, and not only must it be warm, it must be at a particular depth as well. It needs at least, we would say, 200 feet. Also, there must be low wind shear. And once you have these ingredients, as the storm progresses towards the west, there's what you call updrafts, okay? So within each thunderstorm, you have a strong upward current that produces an area of low pressure. And once you have the area of low pressure, due to the rotation of the Earth, what we call the Coriolis force, it causes the system to start rotating in a counterclockwise manner. All the while, you have more storms forming because of the upward motion in the atmosphere. This leads to the formation of more thunderstorms. So as this continues happening, you continue progressing towards the west. You have the storms continue to get stronger and stronger. You get more updraft and you get more moisture in the air. So this continues producing, it's basically like a runaway train effect. Once you get one storm going and it continues forming, they all continue building up as they continue moving towards the west. So the storms goes in phases. It starts with the tropical depression phase. At this point, they don't get a name yet. They're just given numbers. Once you get to 39 miles per hour and above, then you start having named storms. This is tropical storms. So that's from 39 to 73 miles per hour. Then from 74 miles per hour up till and above, you have what you call hurricanes. So with the hurricane, in the hurricane categories, this goes up to 5. So there's category 1, category 2, with hurricanes up to 111 miles per hour that has sustained winds greater than that. They're called major hurricanes because they tend to do the most damage as far as towards the coast or anywhere that they make landfall. They also tend to bring a lot of rain to the areas that they do strike. And one thing I'd like to point out about hurricanes, though, is the same area of low pressure that's produced at the center. What happens is this causes the ocean below it to form basically like a bulge. So it forms like a bulge of a lens, for example. And this bulge travels with the storm as it moves towards the west. In most cases, the storm surge, as it's called, tends to do the most damage as far as life loss during a hurricane. The winds will be destructive, but as far as the human aspect of it, the storm surge tends to be the most dangerous part of the storm. For this year's hurricane season, we can expect a 75% chance near normal hurricane season. And what that means is, based on the past 3 years, we've had below normal seasons. So even a near normal season now would give us way more activity that we've had than the past couple of years. This year, however, the forecast is particularly difficult because there are certain climatological aspects that are making uncertainty, bringing uncertainty to the predictions. One of those being the La Nina, which is the cooling of the ocean temperatures in the eastern Pacific. And this has the effect of creating less wind shear, which tends to lead to more hurricanes forming. However, there's also another aspect taking place where it's called the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation. And what that is, it's the ocean temperatures of the Atlantic and the strength of the monsoon. Normally during there are high phases and low phases to the what you call the AMO. So during the high phases, there'll be high Atlantic Ocean water temperatures, and also the monsoon trough would be strong. And how the monsoon trough ties into it is that this is what produces the disturbances from Africa. So once those two ingredients are strong, then that would be something that would enhance the season. But since the last 3 years, we've had the 3 below average hurricane seasons. Okay, so as I said, it's an oscillation which lasts 25 to 40 years. So we're not sure right now if we're in the high phase or we've just begun the low phase. So if we have begun the low phase, then that means that even though it would be a La Nina year, there's a possibility that there won't be enough disturbances created to make it an active season. But again, these are all predictions. It's early in the season still. So as the season progresses, then we'll have more information to get a better idea of what is going to happen for the season.
Still ahead, how is St. Martin joining local, regional, and international partners to better coordinate efforts as it relates to weather? And what are the benefits of St. Martin being a member of the World Meteorological Organization? These topics and more as Dcomm's annual Met Department Special continues. A key area of opportunity for the Met Department is its ability to better coordinate between partners, locally, regionally, and internationally. Met Department Head Mr. Joseph Isaac explained how this is being done in light of the standards outlined by the World Meteorological Organization.
The Meteorological Department, St. Martin, is based on different treaties, have certain commitments. And we happen to be a member of the World Meteorological Organization. This membership we share along with Curacao, but the Meteorological Department St. Martin is an entity on its own. But because of certain regulations and so on, we share membership with the World Meteorological Organization, which is the organization that really guides the work of meteorology in the world. This entity also works very closely with the International Civil Aviation Organization, which puts a lot of emphasis on meteorology for aviation. So that being said, you have different geographical locations from the World Meteorological Organization. So we belong to Region 4, which would include North America, Central America, the Caribbean. And there are certain coordinations we do. So for example, a lot of persons, when we're into the hurricane season and so on, will hear about the National Hurricane Center and hurricane watches and warnings and so on. These things are very well organized. In Region 4, our warning area in terms of tropical storms would be the National Hurricane Center, which is based in Miami. But all the countries in the region that belongs to the World Meteorological Organization contributes towards that entity. And it is so coordinated that every year we have meetings and we look at the hurricane season, we look at coordination, etc. And coordination is very important because as a scientist you can have information, but if you don't get it out to persons and you don't get it out there on time, then it's basically better off if you did not have the information, if you understand what I'm saying. And then the other thing too is that even getting to persons or getting to the public before you have anything occurred is very important because they need to know what you mean when you use certain terms and what actions they should take. So we take coordination very seriously. But we have to be careful because sometimes people try and get ahead of themselves and so on. All weather information in terms of tropical storm comes from the National Hurricane Center. So whether you get it from the Weather Channel or the St. Martin Met Service or so on, it all comes from the National Hurricane Center in Miami because they're the ones with the aircraft that go into it and everything else. What we do at our level is that we curtail the information to St. Martin and our region. And we work very closely with this entity in terms of, so they would call us and say, okay, a storm is approaching your area, expect X, Y, and Z. And then we would say, okay, based on the timing and the information you're getting from the aircraft or from satellites, etc., we think it is time to put in a watch or warning or whatever for the island. We have to be very careful because we know that country, St. Martin has Dutch and French, and the dynamics are such that even if we're so small, that the authority that is responsible for the Dutch side is not the same authority responsible for the French side. So all responsibilities in terms of watches and warnings and so on would be the responsibility of the St. Martin Meteorological Service. But for the French side, officially, it would be Meteo France. Previously, St. Bart's and Sabre would be, the responsibility would be with the Curaçao Met Office. Now that responsibility is with the Netherlands Met Service from this hurricane season. Now you would appreciate that any storm coming in that area, it would be very unlikely for any storm to affect the Dutch and not affect the French St. Martin or not affect Sabre or Statia. But you have different entities responsible. So again, zeroing on the small area, it makes it even more important for us to coordinate. So what we try and do is that before we put in any watches or warnings for these territories, at that level, which would be the heads of the department's level responsible for meteorology, we try and coordinate and have a discussion so that one place would not have a watch and another place have a warning. I'm not saying that it cannot happen, but we try as much as possible that if we put in a watch, we put in a watch for the entire region.
The World Meteorological Organization. It's a specialized agency of the United Nations with 191 member states and territories. It is the UN system's authoritative voice on the state and behavior of the Earth's atmosphere, its interaction with the land and oceans, the weather and climate it produces, and the resulting distribution of water resources. Mr. Isaac details what it means for St. Martin to be a part of such an organization.
Once you're a member of the World Meteorological Organization, there are certain standards that you have to keep, and you could have certain audits. In other words, all our staff, we have, for example, you have observers, that's the persons who go out and observe the weather. You have the forecasters, which are the ones who do the predictions of what you expect to happen. We have the department which deals with climatology, which is data, and then we have our technical department and then administration. The observers, they would, before they are licensed to do work as observers, they would have to be trained. In the region, the training institute is in Barbados, which is called the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology. So the World Meteorological Organization, because of the importance of meteorology, it's not a fly-by-night thing where you just come in and you can work. So that's one of the things that the World Meteorological Organization does. For example, it makes sure that all the staff are trained and they are licensed. So it's just like a pilot. So the observers and the forecasters would have a certificate saying that they are competent to do that work because of the importance of the job. And it's not just a one-off. So for example, if you're a forecaster for 20 years, and you just sit in there doing forecasts for 20 years, it doesn't mean that you're going to escape, because every 2 years we're supposed to do we're doing what we call a competency test. So we actually do a test with our staff to make sure that what they are trained for, they can do it and they're up to standard. Again, certain things change, and then the World Meteorological Organization would pass on the information, and then we would have to train staff in those areas. So it's a very organized system. It's a United Nations entity, and it's a very organized system, and we're very happy to be part of it because it keeps all the standards up, and being part of the World Meteorological Organization and having to follow the instructions that they give and work alongside with the International Civil Aviation Association, then with all that, it keeps things to a certain level in terms of your ratings of your airports and so on.
The Met Department St. Martin is currently going through a moving phase, and with it comes some challenges and upgrades. Mr. Isaac explained to us what this move means to the Met Department, its services, and communication with the public.
Since I've been here, we've been going through a few phases. You would appreciate that from January 2013, we were basically an observation station. And from January 2013, we became a forecast station, which would mean more staff, more responsibilities, and so on. We have gone through that transition pretty okay, and we have received a number of very good reviews in terms of the work we do. The relocation phase is a physical move, and like everything else, there would be interruptions. We're just hoping that we can minimize interruptions as much as possible, because the meteorological service is such that we operate 24 hours and we cannot switch off for a day or anything like that. So basically there's going to be a period when we have to run 2 offices parallel before we shut down where we are presently. So it's a challenge. Like everything else, there will be challenges, but we can basically tell the public that there will not be any interruptions. And as much as possible, we will keep the service up to par as we continue to develop the service, because we have just installed high-tech, maybe the best in the Caribbean right now in terms of our automatic weather station, and that also takes care of low-level wind shear, so that would increase safety at the airport. The government of St. Martin has invested a lot of money in that piece of equipment, and it is up and running now. It was installed last month. We pretty soon expect to launch our new website, and we're very excited about that because it is a lot more user-friendly and very interactive. So we have a lot of things coming on stream. In terms of our relocation, we're really going into temporary structures, and we're hoping that we can get into a building that we can finally call home, that would have all the necessary things that we think that we in St. Martin can have a meteorological service that may be the envy of the Caribbean. We really want to be high-tech and up there and be able pretty soon to maybe be regular features on the local television station doing presentations, etc.
Mr. Isaac concludes by sharing some key points of advice on how we can be better prepared to deal with whatever Mother Nature decides to throw at us this hurricane season.
One of the most important things would be knowing your environment, knowing where you live, what you need to do, and what steps you need to take. And you cannot wait for last minute if there's anything going on or when there's a watch or warning that you're going to take those decisions. You have to know from now that I'm living in a low-lying area. It is prone to flooding, so this is my biggest risk. I am in X area, but I may not have a problem with flooding, but there could be the chance of falling rocks and so on. Or my vulnerability might more be towards strong winds. These are the kind of things that you need to know so that you know ahead that you can plan. There's a subtle difference, for example, between a strong tropical storm and a Category 1 hurricane. But you have to know that if, for example, you have a lot of glass windows and so on, and you have shutters, you're not going to say, oh, they only said it's a storm, it's not going to be a hurricane, so as a result, I'm not going to put up my shutters. So these are the kind of things you need to know. The other thing is you need to know where you're going to get information from. What are the credible sources of information? It's always good to hear people say things on the street, but if someone says something about a storm on the street, your job would be now to get on the internet, get to a website, get to listen to the media and so on, and get the fact.
Remember, we are in the hurricane season. On behalf of the government of St. Martin, the Department of Communication kindly reminds you to ensure that you and your household are fully prepared. This concludes our video presentation, and we invite you to log on to the official government website stmartingov.org for more hurricane preparedness tips and to access this and other Dcomm video presentations. I'm Cedric Peterson. Thanks for watching.